YouTubers, space detectives and pareidolia police alike. Today we have this image taken by the Curiosity rover not very long ago. This one here is from Sol 2137 and was taken back a while back now, back about a month ago. There's also another image of the same thing here taken a few days later, which I have here. This is a close-up of it. Now this was cool because I spotted this and I thought, oh, I wish there was a closer image of it, and then a few days later there was. And there it is. You have this, what looks like a reptoid skull under this rock here. And this is pretty clear as well, but this is it's not huge, but because the rover zoomed the camera in, we can see it in some quite good detail for once. So I was quite pleased about this one. Now before I go any further, I'll show you the close-up of it here, because I did a meme of it, which I did publish at the time on Facebook, I believe, on Mars Magazine, and we got both sets of images here. We've got the one taken on Sol 2137, and almost 10 days later we have the one taken on 2146. So that's 9 days later, exactly the same area, as you can see. The one below isn't very clear, and the one on top here is a lot clearer. So we're going to focus mainly on that one, because there's not really any points in looking at this one, because it's fuzzy and a bit further away and out of focus. But that just goes to show how different a photograph can be just by being a few meters closer to an object. It really does make a hell of a difference, especially with a low-res camera. Unfortunately, the Curiosity rover has gone quiet on us recently. In the last week, we haven't had any images from the rover. It's got a technical fault with the hard drive or something, the computer on board. It does have another computer on board, and they're trying to fix it. It's still talking to the people at JPL and NASA, but it's not sending any images, which I find a little bit suspicious. But it has had glitches and problems before, which they have fixed. And of course, a lot of you may already know also, the Opportunity rover we haven't heard from for more than 2 months now, since the big storm, sandstorm on Mars. I did do a video about that. I'll put a link to that at the end of this one. We haven't heard anything from that. That's gone into complete shutdown, or it's gone into hibernation. And unless a considerable gust of wind comes along and cleans the sand and dust off of the solar panels, then we're probably never going to hear from that rover again, unfortunately. So that's a real shame. So let's hope that we do get the Curiosity rover fixed, and let's hope a gust of wind comes along and cleans the dust off the old Opportunity rover as well, because otherwise we won't get any fresh images of the ground on Mars until the next rovers go up and land up there, which will be quite some time yet. There is a mission launching in November, but I don't think that will get there for months after that. So it could be the middle of next year by the time we actually see anything. So let's, fingers crossed, let's hope that at least one of the rovers comes back to life, and at least we get some of the images that is taken and is not able to send us at the moment. Perhaps it came across something like this. Perhaps the people at NASA decided to shut it down to stop us seeing images of aliens and skulls and wreckage. Who knows? There's also this one here. I'll show you this in better detail in a minute. There's this one here. This was spotted by one of the researchers on my Facebook group, Neal Spence, who does some really good gigapan work. He does. And he's got a very good eye, and he spotted this. So I made a quick meme of that a while ago as well. And it doesn't look the same. This is a side angle, but it looks like, of what looks like a reptilian head. It's very square on top, which I find rather odd. This may be actually a statue rather than a fossilized skull or head. This looks like the nose here and the mouth here, coming round, and chin, and he got what looked like teeth here as well. I don't know if you can see that. Let's go in a bit closer. It's a little bit blurry, this one, The Opportunity camera was even lower res than the Curiosity, and luckily this was quite close up, but it's not that close, and it's very dark, the image. The lighting isn't very good, and it's a very dark coloured type of rock, if this is a carving. It's very dark blue, and it's hard to see any detail, but you can see the eye here, huge eye socket with what looks like some kind of eye still in it there. And you've got the mouth coming around here, you've got these teeth here that you can see, and the back of the head. You've got some interesting details up here on the top of the head, and you've got the nose coming round. Is that a reptilian? Could well be. I wouldn't write it off. It may not be, but it certainly looks like one to me. And it wouldn't be the first skull or statue that I've published. I've published about 100 now, somewhere around 50 or 60 statues, and about a similar number of skulls as well, mostly animal skulls, but quite a few actual alien humanoid skulls. And this is a good example, I think. It's a bit different from the rest. This is much more like a reptoid. And you can see, I mean, you can see why I've made up the silly title for this this meme here, Kiss Me Quick, Mars Reptoid Skull, because of the mouth area here. Look at the mouth. You've got lips, what looks like a mouth here with lips, kind of round there like that, and the mouth coming round like that. Okay, really crazy detail. And you've got quite a clear eye socket here, and the other one's a little bit vague because it's kind of at a funny angle from us. It's not facing towards us, it's facing slightly to my right as it's looking at us, or our right I should say. And you've got the cheekbone coming around here, you've got a nasal cavity here, just here, the dark hole there. What this hole here is, I don't know. There's sort of a gap in the skull. Now, it did occur to me that some of these Martians may have actually had exoskeletons to a point at least, which is why we see so many well-preserved specimens, because actually what we're seeing is not necessarily preserved skin, petrified or mummified skin, but actually an outer skeleton rather than an inner skeleton. This is possible. I couldn't say for definite either way, but there is a possibility that some of these skulls on Mars are actually the outer part of the skull and not the inner. But we will probably never know that because NASA won't even admit that they're there, and are still claiming to be looking for microbes and evidence of water and that kind of thing. Yeah, okay. But this was pretty cool. I mean, what else can I say? It looks like a reptoid, and I would imagine that it would have another nasal cavity on the other side of this part here, but we can't see it. It would be out of shot. There would be two holes here, and there's a weird hole up here. This looks like damage of some sort. Many of the skulls and fossils that I found, fossilized skulls and petrified skulls that I found, and heads, do have cranial damage. Some of them look like they've been hit with a blunt instrument, like a hammer or an axe or something like that. So this, I don't know why that's there. This is a very strange structure here, where the ear, you would think an ear would be here if it was a human skull. But there's this rather strange thing here, and I don't really quite understand what this is, what this represents, but I'd imagine there would have been an ear here, perhaps. But of course, if it's a reptoid or reptilian, then it wouldn't necessarily have human ears. It would just have a hole in the side of its head, like reptiles do, I would assume. But this is rather odd, this thing sticking out here. And of course, this may be heavily damaged, and some of it may have broken off here, and we're seeing sort of some of the internal workings of the skull there. I don't really quite understand that. And you've got this kind of bit that's kind of almost separated here, which is rather strange. But like I said, it may have had a very unique and different bone structure that is very different from ones we're used to seeing on Earth. And I would expect to see that with a Martian skull. As with this one here, it doesn't conform to any species that we know of on Earth. Although I'm sure some people out there will claim that this was not shot on Mars, this image, and was taken on Devon Island or somewhere like that, where there actually are no reptiles at all. So yeah, how does that work? But you can actually see the teeth here if you look carefully. I didn't brighten it much. I could have gone in a bit harder with it, I think, and brightened it up a lot more. It's a little bit vague, that one, and it looks better, like most of these do, if you don't get too close. So there it is, really. I'll put some clips of this in a minute as well, so you can see that it's there in the original clip that I did, and then what I did is I found it again over a week later, and did another clip, and then put the two clips together to compare. So pretty cool, I thought. It may just be a rock, but some of the details here are far too specific, especially the fact that we've got a cheekbone in exactly the right place. We've got a nasal cavity in exactly the right place. We've got two eye sockets, which are in exactly the right place. We have lips and mouth detail in exactly the right place. We do have some rather odd details around here, which I don't quite understand. But this is an alien skull, perhaps, and it may be heavily damaged and eroded. Parts may have broken off. There are also maybe bits of clay and stuff solidified to it as well, which aren't actually part of the skull itself, which is common with fossils. I've got some comparisons up here. I will have links to all these images, by the way. You'll have a link to the main image there and the other one here, where you can see it from further back. So this is considerably closer up, as you can see in the raw image. It's much closer. And that's the kind of distance we need to get any good detail from specimens like this, possible specimens. There was this article I had up a while back of a skull I found. This was in the Daily Express from the UK. This was back in May the 12th. I sent this to the press and they actually published it, which is unusual. They usually don't. And there's also a link to another one of the things I found here, the lioness statue on Mars. You can link to that. So I'll have a link to this page. And there's loads of stupid comments as usual at the bottom of the page. We won't go through those. I'll let you look at them yourself. And it's clearly a skull. I mean, what else can I say? I've got the video up here. So this would not be, if this is a Reptoid skull that I'm showing you, the new one, and that's a possible reptilian skull as well, or head that I showed you, the one that Neal Spence found. I mean, what you've got to take into account that there are over 100 other examples of these on my channel. I've found most of them, but many of them were found also by other people. About 10% of them, I think, found by other researchers that then sent them to me. But this is one of my favourites, and this is absolutely massive. This thing is huge. This is about 2 feet from here to here, which would make the owner of this skull not only very, very scary looking, as you can see, but very large indeed, possibly over 20 foot tall. It's more than double. It's about, the capacity of this skull would be something in the realms of about 4 times the size of a human skull, okay? Which would make the person probably 3 or 4 times taller. I don't know what head to body ratio there would have been on such a creature, or humanoid, or whatever this would have been. This looks kind of humanoid, but there's some very distinctly alien morphology going on here with the teeth and stuff, which are not human at all. And it's much, much wider and extreme, the shape of it. This would have come right out here. Pretty scary. I mean, that's one of my favourite. That's called Mars Life Uncovered, NASA Deception Busted Part 1, if you want to see that. There is the highlighted version of that. So, I mean, to me, that's indisputable. And it's one of the best examples you'll ever see of any skull on Mars. So there are many of these. This is one of the best ones. There's, like I said, about 100 of these on my channel. Some of them are statues, some of them are actually mummified heads, but many of them are actually fossilized skulls that are kind of stuck in the rock like this. and solidified with clay around them and kind of stuck between rocks. And here's some examples here of some fossils here, an ancient fossil. Often, as we got here, you can see the nasal cavity and the eye cavity there are filled in with clay. So you can't see an actual hole where the eye would be. This is very common. And then what the archaeologists would do, once they've retrieved the skull, they would then use a little drill tool, a special tiny little engraving drill, and then drill out all the clay until they got rid of it, and then you'd have an eye socket. So they very kind of painstakingly clean up these specimens very carefully, and then what you would see in a museum, for instance, would be a replica of the actual skull, not the original. They keep the originals tucked away, and they make replicas to put on display for the public. And so if you just type in fossilized skull on Google Images, this is what you get, and you'll see my article just here. There's my clip there, which I just showed you from the article, and it also appears up here somewhere. So there it is again, Daily Express, yeah, theexpress.co.uk. So these are gradually creeping into the general consensus about what skulls are, somehow. My images are actually creeping into these things, and maybe that means they're being accepted. Who knows? But there we are. There's the clip. And like I said, there are many, many examples. Let's have another very quick look at that again, and I'll let you go. I'll put a couple of clips in at the end, but I won't spend too long. That looks like a reptoid skull. I know it has some confusing detail around here, where the ear would be, just there, or the ear hole. But of course, this is alien, and we shouldn't expect these things to look exactly like things that we have on Earth. I would expect it to look more like some of the classic reptoids that we've grown up with as kids in sci-fi art and stuff like that, like this. You know, with a very small kind of little mouth at one end and a sort of reptoid eyes. There was a scientist back in the 70s, I think, who came up with a theory that if the dinosaurs hadn't died out on Earth, then they would have evolved into bipedal, intelligent reptoid or reptilian kind of humanoids. Not humanoids, but reptoids, like this here, and would have developed in a similar way to modern humans. Is it possible that on Mars they had a different evolutionary kind of tree, and that reptoids actually did develop alongside possible humans and other types of intelligent beings? It is possible. Here's the reptoid. This is the one that I think the Australian scientist said that it's possible that some of the dinosaurs developed into very intelligent, upright, walking beings like this. So do excuse my voice. I've got a nasty cold at the moment. I'll leave you with that. I'll put a link to some of these things here. You can just look up reptoid skull or alien reptoid, and this will all come up on Google Images. Some of these are quite interesting illustrations here. But what we have on Mars seems to be a real one. That's a matter of opinion, of course. I think it probably is. I've found so many in this area, skulls and similar things, that I think the likelihood is pretty high. And we have this really nice one by Neal Spence from a side angle, which I thought was pretty cool. Yeah, that was really cool. And if you look at the mouth detail, you can actually see those teeth here sticking up and stuff like that. So even though these are quite low-res images, sometimes the objects or artifacts are quite large, and we can see them in enough detail to kind of work out what we're looking at. So thanks for watching, everybody. I do apologise for my voice again. I have had a very nasty cold now for about a week or two. I'm sure it will go away soon. So there we are. Are there reptoids on Mars? Were there reptoids on Mars? Were there reptilians on Mars? Is there a difference between reptilians and reptoids? I think so. I think reptoids were kind of upright walking reptilians. So there is a slight difference. But I mean, this is still, I think, one of the best scale images that was ever been found on the Martian surface in any rover image. I'm talking about all the different rovers that have been there over the many, many years. So let's do hope that the rovers do come back online, or at least one of them does, because it's going to be a long time before the next one gets there. Fingers crossed. Let's hope the opportunity comes back to life, and let's hope we get some more images from the Curiosity. Fingers crossed. Thanks for watching, everybody. I shall see you soon.